Hello and welcome to Talking Points. I'm Dave Kelly, Director of Advanced Media Production at Cal State Long Beach. Today we're going to talk about a movement that's sweeping the country known as FIRE. That's an acronym for Financial Independence, Retire Early. My guest today is Susan Berkman. Ms. Berkman is the Assistant Vice President for Gift Planning in University Relations and Development here at Cal State Long Beach. Welcome, Susan, and you've been here before, but thanks again for your second visit.
Sure.
Well, let's talk about this FIRE movement, again, Financial Independence and Retire Early. How did this get started, and what are the people that are involved in this? Let's talk about the demographics of the people that are generally involved in this. What do they hope to do to achieve, or how are they going to achieve this goal of financial independence and early retirement?
Sure. Well, the movement started, I don't know that it actually picked up steam until later, but there was a book written in 1992 by Vicki Robin called Your Money or Your Life. And in it, what she was suggesting is that it's how we spend our time earning money should not drive everything in our life, that there were other considerations. She was interested in sustainability and environmental conservation, and that was important to her. But she also began to think about her own consumer habits and buying less stuff. And so what she did is that she cut down her spending and then reinvested the difference and found that she could retire at a much earlier age than she had anticipated.
And at that point, I'm going to put up a magazine cover from Money magazine that shows Vicki Robin. This is what she looks like now. Of course, as you mentioned, she wrote the book in 1992, which is called Your Money or Your Life, which espoused all the values that you're talking about. What's the value of my life versus the time I spend at work, and how do I want to align my working life with my spiritual values and other values?
So what she talks about is she began to re-quantify how she spent money. And when she went to make purchases, she thought about it in terms of her hours of life energy. How many hours did I have to work? How much life energy did I have to use to be able to afford this pair of really nice shoes, or whatever it was that she was looking at? And when she began thinking about it that way, she realized she didn't want to spend her hard-earned money quite the same way. So she retired and just eventually began to write about her experience and give investment advice. Where I think it picked up steam especially was for the Millennial Generation.
And that's the demographic I wanted to get to in that first question. The demographic today that's interested and motivated by this is the Millennial Generation.
The Millennials, that's right.
And why is that?
Well, what I think, this is my personal theory, she hasn't endorsed it, is that many of these, the millennials came of age right at the time that the recession hit.
The Great Recession.
Great Recession, and I can speak from personal experience because I have a son who graduated from college, and the year that he graduated was right when the recession was at its worst, and he couldn't get a job. Not the job in the field that he wanted to go into. It was just not there. And so he had to really rethink what he was doing. And luckily, he and his wife especially, is very entrepreneurial, so they opened their own small business. So they have many elements of the FIRE lifestyle going. They're very, very frugal. They've been teaching us all about giving up cable and other things that they've done to cut expenses, but now it has become a lifestyle choice for them beyond what may have at first been a necessity. So I think that depending on how much money actually you can save, of course it always depends on what you earn. The philosophy that I have seen many of the blogs talk about is to save at least 50% of what you earn. And that's great if you earn enough money to cover basic living expenses.
As you mentioned, the FIRE movement really took off as a result of the Great Recession with the Millennial Generation. There was a gentleman by the name of Pete Adeney who has started a blog site. He actually started the blog site in 2011. That blog site is called Mr. Money Mustache.
Yes.
And it's called that because he used to have a handlebar mustache earlier in his life. And he gives advice, and it became a very popular blog site, preaching frugality, of course, and many other things. But I think that the people that really got into this early on were the software engineers, which is what he was. And his wife was also a software engineer. So they put their two salaries together and saved 50% or more. And they were able to retire at age 30 in their case.
Yes, but they also made some very, very drastic cuts in lifestyle. You know, not just Mr. Money Mustache, but other FIRE adherents have written about how they made a choice not to buy fancy furniture. In some cases, people were still sleeping on mattresses on the floor as they did in college in order to save everything they made, with the motivation of going to pursue passion projects. So for some people, yes, it was a retirement. They did invest enough to where they could retire, but that didn't mean they didn't stop working. And in fact, Mr. Money Mustache has never stopped working.
That's right, and that's important to point out, because there are really two goals here. One is financial independence, and then there's the retiring early aspect of it. I'll get to the retire early in just a moment. But the financial independence means you put enough money aside so that you can invest and reinvest so that that money has a return that you can live upon, which is supposed to be around 4%, which is what most experts say.
But it used to be 8% at the time that Vicki Robin wrote her book. Typically, investments were earning 8%. So to be able to put enough money aside meant that you didn't have to save quite as much because you'd get much better returns. Well, the recession taught us all to be very conservative in what we withdraw or what we're thinking about for the future. So the standard advice is to be able to live on 4% of your savings. So that brings up interesting math, because to live on $50,000, you need to have $1.25 million saved. So if you can do that quickly, terrific. If you can't, and if $50,000 is your goal, then it is a challenge.
The other part of this is the retire early.
Yes.
And retire early is maybe not what it really seems, because even Mr. Money Mustache is not retired. He's writing a blog site. He's giving seminars.
Yes.
He gives out advice.
Right.
He also has other businesses that he's involved in. He built his own house, and he enjoyed it so much that he decided to start a carpentry company and build houses for other people. So he's been into the carpentry business and house building business.
Well, and several other FIRE bloggers invested in real estate. And they bought investment properties that they now post on, HomeAway or on Airbnb, all those kinds of things, so that they have what everyone calls side hustles. But I think the big thing about the financial independence is the independence to make those choices. But then the retirement part is really just retirement from having a structured 8 to 5 or whatever the hours were kind of existence, so that you could then devote your time to those passion projects, whether it means spending money or spending money on investments, or whether it means traveling, or whether it means doing important work in the community.
And certainly when one retires at age 40, one has a lot of energy left.
Yes.
And hopefully good health.
Yes.
And you can't just sit on the couch all day long. You have to do something. And so that leads to working again, but doing it in a way that's maybe more meaningful than the work you were doing before, when you were required to show up 9 to 5 or whatever the hours were.
Absolutely. And there are people that have also come up with great ideas, started businesses and sold their businesses very young, and then have turned around and started similar businesses again. So there's story after story of people that have just been very entrepreneurial all along. So.
And there's also a component of sustainability in this movement as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the more they get into it, the more they say, the folks that are involved in the fire movement, they will say, well, I'm doing this not just for myself, but for my kids and for other people and my neighbors and so on. And if I'm not buying a new car every 3 years, then I'm saving metal and I'm saving all of the resources that it takes to manufacture cars. And so I will keep my car for 15 or 20 years. And so in that way, there's a kind of environmental angle or sustainability angle to this as well.
Well, there is. I mean, one of the things that Vicki Robin described in the article and in her book a little bit is about her lifestyle choices. And she decided to learn a lot of do-it-yourself skills. She wanted to learn how to fix her car herself. She wanted to learn how to grow her own food, do that sort of thing, to become as self-sufficient as absolutely possible. So there is an element of self-sufficiency and an element of wanting to learn to take care of yourself in a different way. I haven't seen it in every single fire blog, but certainly Mr. Money Mustache has, and he talks about some of, in his blog, I remember one of his posts about learning to change his own oil for the first time, you know, so that it is always an adventure as you're learning these new skills.
Well, we just have about a minute or so left before we go to the break, but Susan, before we do break, I want to emphasize some of the valuable traits that we're learning as a result of fire. I mean, we're not just learning them now. Our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents knew about these things, but somehow after World War II and when we got into the consumer age of the 60s and 70s and 80s,
abundance,
maybe we went a little too far with our consumerism. So pulling back a little bit maybe is a good thing. What are some other good things that we're learning from the fire movement?
Well, I think the whole do-it-yourself aspect of things. It's not a bad thing to learn how to fix things around the house or to be able to grow your own food so that you can have that experience. And I know especially it's fun to garden if you really like that. I think part of it is learning what things you really enjoy doing yourself, because if you really hate fixing your own car, it's probably good to put into your budget a mechanic bill or two, as opposed to trying to make yourself do something that you help. But I think that it's really great to learn that. And I think it's really good to learn to save. The whole question about values choices comes up. Do I really need to spend money on this object or this piece of clothing, or, you know, or do I really want to spend my money on experiences, as that other blogger did? Do I want to spend time with my friends, even if it means going out or traveling? Is that more important? So if we're asking ourselves these questions, then we're not just blindly purchasing and frivolously spending our money.
On that note, we're going to have to go to the break.
Okay.
And when we come back from the break, we'll talk about some of the potential pitfalls of the fire strategy. Stay tuned.
Should your company buy or sell, expand or not, relocate, or simply stay the same? If you'd like to examine past and present predictions, integrating finances and people, and make future predictions based on all that information, a career in economics is for you. You can become a part of this exciting field with a degree from Cal State Long Beach.
Welcome back to Talking Points. I'm Dave Kelly, and my guest today is Susan Berkman. We're talking about the FIRE movement, which is Financial Independence, Retire Early. And before we went to the break, Susan, we were focusing on the positive aspects of the FIRE movement, and there are a number of positive aspects. Certainly frugality is good for everyone.
Yeah.
Excess frugality, I don't know, there are limits.
Some people like, you know, I mean, they've chosen that lifestyle and they become comfortable with it.
Right, but there does seem to be a pretty major paradox, or maybe a couple of different paradoxes that we can talk about here with the FIRE movement. One of them is a blogger, a female blogger who was about 36 years old, who said, I enjoy being part of the FIRE movement, I'm saving my money, and I've got investments, I've got portfolios that are growing all the time. I'm really enjoying the fact that I can do this, but one thought keeps me awake at night,
Yes.
and that thought is, what if everybody else becomes a FIRE adherent and they stop consuming.
Yes.
You know, and if they stop consuming, if everybody else stops consuming, then my portfolio, because my portfolio is full of corporations that sell products,
Right.
then it's going to stagnate. And
That's right.
so the paradox is, if the FIRE movement grows too rapidly, too many people get involved in it, it could grind the economy to a halt in certain ways, and that wouldn't help anybody. So what are your thoughts about that particular paradox?
Well, I think it definitely exists. I think the challenge is trying to figure out other ways to sustain yourself, and that's why there's so much of a do-it-yourself nature. And there's also the sharing economy philosophy that many people engage in, where they'll trade services, they'll share rides, for example, whatever it is that you're sharing or that you choose to do. So if there are things, that kind of bartering system, that kind of sharing continuing, then as it expands, the whole basis of the economy, I think, will change just a little bit. So the paradox definitely is there, and it's definitely going to exist.
Right. There's also an issue with people that are perhaps taking it to an extreme on the other end, which is we're going to intentionally not earn money so that we can take advantage of social services that will support us.
Yes, and I read a blog about that where one of the bloggers was saying he was beginning to think about how he was going to ever be able to send his children to college, and he and his wife made the decision not to earn over a certain amount of money so they would qualify for the maximum in financial aid, and they were already using food stamps to attain their retirement lifestyle. So really the question is, if you have the capacity to work but you've chosen not to, then what are you doing to help the public services? What are you taking advantage of? So there's a lot of questions that remain to be answered about the extremes within the movement itself. But I think those are, again, personal questions people have to look at in terms of their values and what they expect.
Well, there's also a famous financial advisor we've all seen on television many times. Suze Orman is her name. And she got into a very public fight, at least online, a public fight online with Mr. Money Mustache, who we've been talking about. And she said something along the lines of, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it, because it's not forward thinking. Tell us about that.
Her initial response was based almost entirely on the math of being able to retire at age 30. And there are a lot of assumptions that people have made about how to pull from your investments in a way that are sustainable. So the going philosophy is that you shouldn't ever take more than 4% of what you have invested to sustain your lifestyle. And to sustain your current lifestyle, you need to save at least 25 times what your current living expenses are. So to give an example, if you're earning $50,000 a year and you need the $1.25 million in savings, if you're withdrawing at 4%, then you can sustain that $50,000 lifestyle. At one point in this public challenge or whatever, Suze Orman said, oh, you need a minimum of $5 million to retire early. And there are a number of reasons that she came up with that number. Using that 4%, first of all, if you're going to retire at the age of 30, you're looking ahead at 60, maybe 70 years even of retirement. You're looking at not having income for a very long time. So you have to assume that the earnings on that retirement are going to be stable. And as we've seen with the market, it goes up and it can go way down. And if there's a heavy dip, you're not going to be able to take your 4%. The other really big challenge is that over the course of a 30-year-old's lifetime, prices can increase up to 4 times what they are now. And I know that probably we both remember when gas was a quarter, a quarter a gallon. So we can see in very simple things how inflation works. And the big challenge is that when you factor that in, to get to that $50,000, the equivalent of that $50,000 a year lifestyle, you need $5 million. So based on the math, she was saying why she hates it, that people have not saved enough money. They're missing all of their highest earning years because typically people make more money by the time they're in their 50s because of raises, promotions, seniority, all those kinds of things. And they're missing out on that. The other thing, though, is that she was saying that she didn't think that fire adherents were saving enough because they weren't thinking about a time in their life where they might need extensive health care, because health care is extremely expensive in this country. So I know that for many older adults, a big concern is how they're going to pay for long-term care. It can be anywhere from $80,000 to $100,000 a year in the Los Angeles and Orange County area. So that's a lot of money a year to have saved to be able to sustain yourself if you need that kind of care. And that doesn't even count if you have a big medical procedure or very expensive treatments, like for some catastrophic disease. So she was really urging people to rethink how much they might need to retire. In the course of the TIFF with Mr. Money Mustache, she ended up saying, well, there is something we definitely agree on, and perhaps I don't hate it quite as much, and that is that living below your means is an excellent goal, and that saving as much as you can beyond what your minimum expenses are is a worthy goal and something that definitely you should pursue.
I want to pick up on that theme in terms of what we all should be thinking about, whether we're part of the FIRE movement or not. We still need to be concerned about the future and about investing. And none of us can have a crystal ball look at what the future is going to be like.
Yes.
Will the economy stay in a very strong position?
Yes.
Will it go down? Will it be cyclical? Or will there be a flat-out disaster that none of us can predict right now?
Yeah.
So what we do is we try to live our lives based on our aspirations and our goals.
Yes.
So what is the appropriate guidepost for most people to follow as they're planning for the future?
Well, I think that if you're planning on self-funding, doing your entire retirement in a self-funded way, meaning you're only going to live off investments without counting on any other kinds of pensions or Social Security or anything, the guideposts are that you should have saved 25 times your living expenses. So that can be very hefty if you're in a very high earning job and you want to maintain that particular lifestyle, then that means you have to save quite a bit of money. The other thing that people really do have to think about is what other sources of income they're going to have to sustain themselves. And that's why many people in the FIRE movement will look at investing in real estate. I know they look at very safe kinds of investments that aren't entirely tied to high-risk stocks in the stock market, like index funds and mutual funds and other kinds of things that might have slightly lower earnings but are more sustainable over time. So there's still a lot of financial education and a lot of decisions to be made. And that's one really good thing about the Mr. Money Mustache website and all the other websites, is that everyone seems to have their own take on the best way to invest. And there's a lot of sharing of information going on.
And our time is flying. We've just got time for a couple more questions.
Sure.
So I want to now talk about the spiritual transformation that people talk about when they join the FIRE movement, that if it's only about pinching pennies, and that's it, and you're focused on the money, you're still in the same boat with the people that are overspending, because money controls everything.
That's right.
So what is the spiritual transformation that needs to take place for people to really enjoy their lives and have meaningful lives?
I think before even thinking about retirement, you have to have an idea of what that's going to look like. You have to be involved in things or have some creative goals or have some way that you're going to spend your time, because it's a long time between 30 and the point that you might not be here anymore. You could be looking at 70 years. So the big question is, what are you going to do that's productive in that time? And there have been stories of people that have retired early, spent a few years trying to figure all of that out, and ultimately deciding to go back to work because they just really were not happy without pursuing what they realized later was their passion, which was their career to start with. So a lot of it, I think, is getting to know yourself and getting to know what makes you happy, and then also being able to give back. Some people are very happy living in a frugal way, and even Vicki Robin was saying that now with some of her investments, she invests in new businesses in the area where she lives, in small business, and she gives to charity, and she does other kinds of civically conscious activities that really fulfill her.
And as Mr. Money Mustache said on his blog, work is so much better when you don't need the money.
Yes, because you can pursue what you really like doing.
Right. We have one last question, and this is definitely in your ballpark, and that is the concept of leaving a legacy. Because if people do save money and they save early, and that's one of the great things about the FIRE movement, is they start thinking about money in their 20s as opposed to waiting until they're in their 40s or even early 50s before they start worrying about retirement.
Absolutely.
So as you're going through this process of planning ahead, investing, watching investments grow, if it's real estate, if it's the equity markets, whatever it may be, if you get to the point where you don't need all of that money that has been building because of compound interest over the years, what do people think about in terms of that legacy? You can't take it with you. So what do they come to you to talk about?
Well, when people come to me, it's often because they have decided they want to give back to the campus. Either they are local people who love the campus, sometimes non-local people. They are alumni, they're faculty members, and what they want to do is leave a living legacy on the campus. So they will find a way, I'll work with them to help them find a way to either invest in something that provides life income to them, or to put us into their wills or trusts, or to leave us assets. We have many people that have done, people have been investing in real estate for years. And so we have many people that have multiple investments and have spoken with us about how they want to convert that to something on campus that helps future generations of students. So we're always ready to talk to people about that in my office.
We only have about 15 seconds left, but it's also possible to take care of your family and give to the university.
It's never all or nothing. It's never all or nothing. You want to make sure that your family, to the extent that you want them to be covered, are covered. And the big question is, how much is enough? If you're going to leave money to your kids, how much is enough? Do you want to, Warren Buffett says, I don't want to leave so much to my kids that they do nothing, but I want to leave them enough that they can do something. Or you just leave them an I love you gift. So there are a lot of different philosophies, and it all goes back to values. What is it you want to see happen with that money? So.
And on that note, I think we're going to call an end to the program, but thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's been fun.
And thank you for joining us on this edition of Talking Points. Join us again soon for the next episode. Until then, I'm Dave Kelly. Have a nice day.